Hi, my name is Bill Tynan, and this is my racial autobiography. What I want to attempt to do now, in as natural a way as possible, is give you a little glimpse into who I am and why I am by looking through the lens of race and ethnicity. The funny thing is that when I started to think about this topic, I couldn't help but consider the way that race and ethnicity have, for me, become so intertwined um, in my life with things like culture and family, politics, values, beliefs, choices. So this is a story I'm going to attempt to tell. It's not a special story, but it's my story. It's hard to tell a racial autobiography without some of the facts. So here we go. I was born on May 15th, 1978, to Stuart Michael Golditch and Tara Suzanne Tynan here in Los Angeles, Cedars-Sinai Hospital. Both of my parents are Jewish, and this is the identity that I feel most. My family has been here in the Los Angeles area since the 1950s. My mother was born here. My father was born in New York. My grandparents came to Los Angeles from New York in the early 1950s. They met there at a place called the Jefferson School. These are my mother's parents, a school for communist indoctrination. They met in the elevator. My Jewish identity comes first and foremost from my grandparents, through my grandparents. And this is my grandfather here. He is my last living grandparent. This is he and I in 1979. And here we are 10 years later, 1989. Imagine that. What a difference 10 years makes. From my grandparents, what I really developed was what you might call a Holocaust identity, which means that the primary way I understood being Jewish meant remembering the Holocaust. Of course, that's an important part of being Jewish, but I wouldn't know until adulthood that there's much more than just that. A Holocaust identity is something that led me. The message that I got growing up was that being Jewish is great, but it's not something that you want to be very loud about. It's something that you're probably better off keeping to yourself. I grew up in mostly a single parent home with my mother. My mother is divorced from my father and then divorced again from my stepfather. I didn't speak to my dad for 20 years, but that's another story. It really wasn't until college that I began to develop a new view of what it meant to be Jewish. I learned that being Jewish was about much more than the Holocaust, that Judaism had a whole lot to say about the way we live and the way we love and the way we behave and conduct ourselves in this life. I had the amazing opportunity to travel to Israel on a program called Birthright. And what I really learned is that it can be cool to be Jewish too. And today I speak to you as a totally out Jewish man. When I think about being Jewish, there are a few core values that stand out to me as inextricably linked to my identity. The first is a real love for learning. This came very early in my life, and again, it came mostly through my grandparents. This is not a value that's unique to Judaism alone, but it is a value that runs through the Jewish tradition, really going back to the very beginning. And part of that for me also is a real value on the urgency and necessity of knowing what's going on in the world around me, being an active player, even if it just means keeping up. Another value very important to me, very connected to my Judaism, is a sensitivity and an empathy for the other or the outsider or the underdog. There's an idea in Judaism that's really important to me, this idea that we really need to be kind to strangers because we were once strangers too. This is, of course, a biblical reference to the time that Jews were in exile in Egypt. But more broadly speaking, a reference to Jews living in diaspora around the world. And the truth is that this sensitivity really leads to a really well-conditioned sense I have for the worth of all people, regardless of background or circumstance. And finally, my Jewish identity really lends itself to some really important life values that I hold. Among them, the importance of nurturing traditions and passing them on to next generations, the importance and reverence for respect of elders and parents, and a little bit of wanderlust too. And what I mean here is a love for the little things, things of beauty and simplicity, those intangible things that make life worth living. And you know what they are.